Advisor is always pleased to be joined by Cathy Reece, who is a great friend to the M&A Advisor. It's wonderful to see you. She is with Fenimore Craig, an attorney with Fenimore Craig. Cathy, welcome.
Thank you. It is always good to be here. I think it's a great program and a great opportunity for professionals to get together and talk about what they do. And I am an attorney, as you said, at Fenimore Craig. Fenimore Craig is a mountain state type of a law firm. We're in Arizona, Nevada, Colorado. And because of that, we do a lot of the types of cases that come out of real estate, that come out of developments of various types of buildings, shopping centers, apartment complexes, but also a lot of mining work over the years. We've done mining and natural resources. And then in addition to that, because we have an elderly population, we end up having a lot of types of fraud that involves the elderly and trying to get their money. And that's the topic that I was here today discussing, was Ponzi schemes and affinity fraud, and how the elderly are taken advantage of in various markets, and what we need to do to help them get their money back.
Well, let's discuss that. Of course, Bernie Madoff was the biggest Ponzi scheme. National attention was drawn to that. And I think that maybe conventional wisdom was that, well, after that awakening, that people became more aware of that sort of a situation. But where you have greed, you have evolving fraud. So tell us about this affinity fraud, what it is, and so mostly it's the elderly people who are being impacted by this?
Well, fraud has taken place for thousands of years. And it's nothing that's going to go away. It's going to continue. But for the elderly people in the United States at this point, they have the money that they've worked their whole life for in order to get their savings. And they want to know where to invest it and what to do with it. And the banks right now have such low interest rates for them that they can go into the stock market, but there are certain risks that go with the stock market as well. So they're looking for other non-traditional ways to invest their money. And unfortunately, there are a lot of people out there who would love to help them invest their money and find ways to do that, and the schemes that come around. And people who have been defrauded, you know, really have trusted somebody, and they have a friendship or a relationship with somebody, and that's why they gave them their money. Or they have friends that got additional money or additional returns. And you know the old saying that, you know, if it is too good to be true, it is too good to be true. There's a problem with it. And some people just, when they've made these investments and done these types of investments, they get mad at themselves because if they're elderly, they've been away from their family, they're retired, they've moved to Arizona, Nevada, Colorado, Texas, Florida, California, but they don't necessarily have their family and their support groups around them. And so they end up making decisions on their own, and they probably aren't properly advised. And even if they're properly advised, they have been lied to or misrepresented what the investment was. And while they think they might have some mechanism that's secure for them, that they can get their money back, oftentimes people that have lied to them don't document it the way they're supposed to document it anyway. And so it turns out it isn't what they said it was. And the rate of return that they get is even a problem in Ponzi scheme cases, because you could get returns for 6 years, and maybe you invest $1 million and you end up getting $2 million, and you still have your $1 million investments. The problem in Ponzi schemes is that there's an equitable distribution. So that means if you got your profits out and other people didn't, you're probably going to have to pay and settle and return a portion of that money back into the pool so that everybody gets an equitable distribution. That's what a lot of people don't understand about a Ponzi scheme.
Let's talk about the red flags, though, at the onset, before you even get involved in one. First of all, are there particular investments that you sort of see these people use, the themes? And second of all, what are the red flags everyone needs to be aware of?
Well, one of the major red flags is if it's not a licensed or a registered business, particularly for securities, then they have not passed the right tests. And that should be the smell test for you. If it's not licensed and regulated, don't do it. But even if they are licensed and regulated, the next thing is to kind of look at the product. Does the company have a product that they're selling? You know, if they're manufacturing something and they're selling something and you're going to invest money into it and you're going to get some of the money back, it's a legitimate business, it has a legitimate business purpose, and so you can have a little bit of assurance that there's something there behind it. But if there's no business, like in the Bernie Madoff case. They thought they were buying stock. They thought that they were, having an investment and return on their stock, when the stocks were never purchased and the stocks were never invested in. So you have to confirm that there actually is a product. There is something that's there. And so some people go the extra step. They look for, the type of investment that they want to make, that it's secured. Maybe they think they're getting an interest in a note and a deed of trust secured by real property. Which was very common in several of these. I think Woodbridge is one of those, and it's a more recent Ponzi scheme case, or alleged Ponzi scheme case. And then in Mortgages Limited, where I have been actively involved for 9 years, in that case, again, it's a fractional interest in a note and a deed of trust. So they have something, so that when everything collapses, because when you promise too much money, it's going to collapse because you can't possibly return enough money to everybody. But at least then you have a product. You can go out and sell and market and return some of the money, not all of it, but some of the money to those people. So looking for the product is another thing about the red flag. And then, of course, the next question is financial statements. Have they provided you with sufficient financial statements that are audited? And are the documents in order? When you ask for something, do you get it quickly? Those are all red flags if they don't do any of that.
Do we need more regulations? I know that regulations were increased after the Madoff situation, but do we need more because this continues to evolve?
There are certain situations where you probably could have more regulation. Like one of the good things that came out of the Madoff case was they worked with the IRS in a 2009-20 ruling in order to get the ability for the investors to get the theft loss. Not a capital loss, a theft loss. And so in the Mortgages Limited case that I did, the principal had committed suicide. So there wasn't anybody to indict, and there had to be a criminal enterprise going on. So we were able to go to the IRS and get them to change and enhance and modify that rule and regulation to allow the people in our situation where the principal had committed suicide and where there was still enough evidence of the crime that was reported that they could then get the theft loss, which, besides getting some of your money back, being able to take a theft loss off of your income taxes was really helpful and important to the investors. And it at least goes away towards helping these victims who have been victimized. They've been lied to. They've been misrepresented. The details have been misrepresented to them. They already feel bad enough because they did something that was stupid and they shouldn't have made the investment. At least participating in a process and being involved in the process and being able to, on your tax returns, get some of that money back and then get a distribution back once the trustees or the debtor gets the money back and returns it, at least it helps a little bit. The last aspect is the criminal process, because in several of the cases I've been involved in, the principals have gone to jail for theft. You have to get them on something, and it was on theft. And so that's a part of the justice system. You don't mess with the elderly people in the United States, regardless of what state you're in. The state attorney generals are pretty strong and united in trying to minimize the amount of elderly abuse, including financial abuse. And so that last element of justice for the poor victims in these cases is important.
And the funding for litigation is huge.
Yes, and that is probably the most recent trend in the last 5 years. Ponzi schemes and fraud have gone on for hundreds of years in our judicial system, but the last probably 5 years has been the trend has been to try and find financing. So if you're the law firm that is bringing the lawsuit against against the other law firms or the accounting firms or the other entities that are involved in the fraud, you had to do it on a contingent fee basis or fund it yourself, just not be paid for several years until you got a recovery. And there's a real growing industry now for third-party financing that is being done for litigation. And so you can now go to a company like Longford. Longford Capital was on the panel today with us, or to Burford or to Bentham, the major players in the industry, and get the trustee or the law firm to be able to go out and get funding, because then it helps to pay for these huge legal bills in suing defendants that have deep pockets and that also are well funded on the defense.
And you just made the perfect segue. You talked about the panel you were on today where you talked about this fraud. You have been to many of these symposiums. Why do you find it important to be here among your peers and to listen to these panel discussions?
Because the people that tend to be at this conference are the real top leaders within their companies, but they also tend to be thought leaders. And while I can talk about issues with certain people in my area or in certain cases, what I really like to do is think ahead. Where's the trend? Where is this going? What else do we need to do in order to help better handle a bankruptcy, or better handle the recovery for the investors or for the creditors that are involved in a case, or to provide a company with the best opportunity to be able to save the jobs for the community. You know, and those are the types of people that you need to be kind of thinking with and rubbing heads with and rubbing shoulders with, whatever the mixed metaphor is, but just being able to talk through these issues and share ideas, and that's partly what is here. This is not just an educational session, it's a session on specific topics like on Ponzi schemes, where we can talk about what the trends are and where things are going and what you think. Over the years, I've been able to talk about a number of issues because there are cases that come and go and industries that are more prevalent than others. The mining industry is one that we've talked about on several occasions and that I have done various cases on, and it is an interesting area because the mines in the United States are very important for the production of gold and silver and copper and zinc and uranium and the various products that we really need for our economy and for our businesses. And so being able to find a way to get the financing for those companies to save the thousands and thousands of jobs that are in the mining industry and that are vital to smaller communities all around the country is important. We don't just want to liquidate assets, we don't just want to sell stuff off. The lenders do need to get their money back. That's an important part. I represent a number of lenders. But at the same time, we need to be saving the industries, we need to save the employees, and we need to be able to find a way to solve those problems.
Cathy, always wonderful to see you. Thank you so much for your insight.